Okay, so today we're going to be talking about each different type of transportation and when it's good to use each type. So there are 5 different types of transportation. There's rail, water, truck, pipe, and air. And each of them are best suited for certain types of freight compared to others. They have different pros and cons to each one. So we're going to start off by talking about air transportation. Air transportation is great when you need to get something somewhere super fast because it is super fast, but it's also quite expensive. And so it's also another con with that is it can only get exclusively by air to certain places. At some point, anything that's shipped by air is probably going to have to use some other type of transportation to get to its final destination. It's limited on where it can get to because there aren't just airports everywhere. And so the best type of freight that you'd want to ship on an airplane would be something that is a more higher priced item. So as we discussed in class, because air transportation is so expensive, if you have a cheaper item that you're trying to transport by air, then the cost of shipping alone is going to increase the price of the item so much that it's going to then be undesirable to customers. Whereas if you have an already expensive item and you just add on the shipping cost, it's not going to make it a whole lot more expensive. And it's also good for smaller, lighter items just because the available room on aircraft is not as good, and there's a limit on how much weight they can hold. So smaller, lighter, higher priced items are good to transport by air. Moving to trains. Trains are good for long distance, and they're also good for bulky goods. So they can hold a lot of weight and they can take a lot at one time. So if you're needing to ship a lot really far, trains are great for that. And trains are also very cheap. So all of those are good things if you don't mind that they're also pretty slow and not always super reliable. So you have to plan accordingly to know that it may not get there exactly when you're planning for it to get there, but it is a very cheap way to transport things such as trash, sand, chemicals, things of that nature, items in bulk. So then we'll go to water transportation. Water transportation has 2 different ways that it can work. It can be by ocean or by river. But it is also, like trains, pretty slow. So you have to plan accordingly with the kind of freight that you're sending. If it's time sensitive, then you might want to consider a different mode of transportation if possible. But the good thing about water transportation is, like trains, it can hold a lot, even more than trains usually. So if you are trying to ship large quantities of items, water is going to be great, but you have to prepare for the fact that it's going to be slow. But also, like trains, water transportation is extremely cheap. And so if you are shipping lower priced items, it's going to be better to choose a mode like water because it's not going to add a lot of shipping costs to the price of the item. So then there is pipe. That is great for liquids or gases, things like oil, natural gas, things of that nature are great to send through a pipeline. That is the absolute cheapest way to do it, and it's also the safest because you don't run the risk of a truck getting hit or anything like that and those having leaks. And so it is best when it's possible to ship by pipeline for liquids or gases. And then last, we're going to talk about trucks. And this is the most really versatile mode of transportation because roads are everywhere. And so to get to a final destination, almost all types of goods are at some point going to make their way onto a truck because a boat, if it's shipping by water, can't get to a landlocked area, same as an airplane can't just land next to a Walmart and drop off goods or things like that. So roads can get pretty much everywhere. So it is good and necessary almost to use for really any type of freight at some point. But if we're specifically talking about trucks, if you're looking at exclusively using a truck for your mode of transportation, it's good for more light items, things that aren't super heavy, and to go short distances. So if you're not needing to go as far as maybe a train or water, maybe it's just state to state or something like that, a truck is going to be the best way to go. So those are the different types of transportations and what kind of freight is good for each one.